When you want to make a lasting change in your life, a common approach and one that's ever so natural to us is to just think, I really, really want this to happen, so I'm just going to try really hard. Unfortunately, that's a really bad approach, and if you follow that approach alone, then you're setting yourself up for failure. And in this video, I want to tell you why that is. So it's New Year's Eve and you're making your resolutions, and your New Year's resolution for this year is you're going to get fit, you're going to go to the gym 3 times a week for the whole year around. You've tried this before and last time it didn't really go so well, but this time it's going to work because you're going to try that much harder. This is a very common strategy and one that's very natural, but unfortunately it's a bit of a recipe for failure. And I want to tell you why. So the problem with willpower and just trying really, really hard is that firstly, it's not your highest point of leverage when you're trying to instill a habit. Your highest points of leverage are to use what's called a habit system. And for more information about that, you should have a look at my other videos on this YouTube channel. I don't want to talk about that in this video. The second point is that your willpower and trying hard is a finite resource. It's limited. You don't have a never-ending supply. And scientists have actually got a term for this. It's called ego depletion. And I think the best way for me to describe ego depletion is by example. So there was a bit of a flagship study about ego depletion whereby one group of students were allowed to go into a room, and in front of them there were 3 bowls, one with cookies, one with chocolates, and one with beautiful radishes. You know, that horrible little pink vegetable that nobody likes eating. So one group of students were allowed to eat the chocolates and the cookies as much as they liked. But another slightly unluckier group of students were sent into the same room, and they could look at the chocolate and they could look at the cookies, but they could only eat the radishes. As you can imagine, for these students, they were struggling to resist the temptation of the cookies and the chocolate. In fact, it was tormenting for them. One student actually went up to the cookies, picked it up and dropped it on the floor. You could clearly see that they were teased by the cookies, but they all managed to resist the temptation. So following this initial part of the study, the students were then asked to try and solve a geometry puzzle. They didn't know this, but the puzzle couldn't actually be solved, and the test was to see how long they would persist for. The group that could eat the chocolate and cookies managed to last for 20 minutes before giving up, but the group that had to resist the cookies and could only eat the radishes only lasted for 8 minutes. So what happened here? Well, simply the students that had to resist the chocolate and the cookies did so by using willpower, which meant when they had to do the geometry puzzle, they had less willpower to call on and they gave up sooner. Yes, that's right, just resisting food for a short period of time can have a noticeable and measurable effect on your willpower levels. I'm sure you're starting to see now how important it is that we treat willpower as a very valuable resource. This initial study has been followed by a bunch of studies that have backed up these conclusions, and scientists now have what's called the strength model of ego depletion. And the reason it's called a strength model is because what they've found is that willpower, trying hard, ego depletion, whatever you want to call it, is very much like a muscle. Firstly, as I said before, you have a limited supply of willpower. That's to say, if you try hard for a long period of time, you're running a risk of depleting those reserves and using all of it. And if you use all of it, that's when you quit. The other interesting finding to this is that there appears to be kind of like a global willpower reservoir that we draw from no matter what activity we're doing. So for instance, if we're trying to suppress emotions, that can draw from the willpower. If we're trying to resist food or temptation, like in the study, that can come from the same reservoir. If we're trying to solve math problems or do something difficult, that comes from the same reservoir. So all these different activities, even though they're very, very different in nature, all draw from the same willpower reservoir. That's why in the study, students that had to resist the chocolate and the cookies and then had to do a geometry puzzle suffered. So after all these studies, a couple of scientists sat down and looked at all of them to try and find commonalities between them. There were 83 in total, and these scientists were trying to find what are the most prominent causes of willpower depletion or ego depletion, and they came up with these 5 things. Firstly, effort. If you do something that takes a lot of effort, then that's going to have a lasting impact on your willpower. Secondly is perceived difficulty. If you perceive a task or you rate a task as being difficult by nature, that also is a trait for something that will have a big effect on your willpower. Thirdly, negative effect. If you're in a bad mood if you're not feeling too happy, if you're not feeling too great, then that will also have an effect on your willpower levels. If you're showing physiological signs of fatigue, so you're just tired, you look tired, you feel tired, that can have a big effect on your willpower levels, as I'm sure you've recognized before. It's really hard to do stuff when we're feeling tired, right? And finally, if your blood glucose levels are low, then that also will have an effect on your level of willpower. So in short, we have a limited global supply of willpower, and if we do anything that requires effort or difficulty, then it withdraws from that pool. And if we use it all, then we're pretty much screwed. And this brings me to the main point of the video. This is why it's really not a great idea just to rely on trying hard if you want to integrate a new habit or change your behavior. Of course, we need to draw on our willpower sometimes. I'm not saying that we shouldn't try hard. I'm just saying we need to be quite mindful of the fact that, one, trying hard is not a great strategy. If you want to do something for a long period of time, you should try and look for other ways than just consciously pushing yourself to do stuff that you don't want to do all the time. If you do it too much, then you're just setting yourself up for failure. Your willpower reserves will be depleted, and that's when you'll just won't be able to get yourself to do what you need to do, and you'll quit. That's why I say it's not your highest point of leverage. Your highest point of leverage is to set things up like triggers, rewards, change your environment. Just make sure you have all these other things that are helping you, easing you into your new habit. So there is some good news in all of this. The strength theory of ego depletion also includes the fact that willpower can be built up over time. In just the same way that if you go to the gym and you do sets on your biceps, over time your arms will get stronger. Willpower follows the same kind of pattern, at least that's what the evidence seems to point to. So by using your willpower with a right amount of stress, not too much, but the right amount of stress, over time your willpower just gets bigger and bigger, and you'll be more likely to see through stuff that you don't want to do. That's the great news. And in future videos, I want to talk about the things that we can do to build up our willpower. What are the exercises? What are the things we can do in our life that help us develop this willpower and leave us less at the mercy of ego depletion? Those videos are coming up shortly. I hope you found this video useful, and I hope this clarified some thoughts about habit formation and why trying hard is not necessarily the best strategy. If you did like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again soon.